Good timing for sure. Oh man. So I'm going to kick us off here. I get to say, do the welcomes and just welcome. Thank you so much for joining the Harvard 100 second virtual event. I'm Danny Rosen. I'm co-founder of Band Together. I am on a board at the Place of the Table. And I am proud to be an executive member of this esteemed group, Harvard 100. As a reminder, this type of event is what I think we all would say is the essence of the Harvard 100 because it represents our nonprofit community really helping each other through leadership development. And we are so, so glad that you guys have taken time tonight to invest in yourself and your organization to learn about the importance of succession planning. It's what I call the prepare and prevent, or you will repair and repent, is what I call that. So I think in that vein, the Harvard 100 is on a search mission right now. And we are looking to recruit anyone interested in helping lead the Harvard 100 through our own succession plan. And I'll also throw out that diversity is something that we are working towards. So if you are interested, please reach out to me via chat or anybody here that's doing talking tonight. You can send me an email, dannyr@brandfuel.com, and I will help get that party started. Also, I think it would be insane for us not to give a really loud, loving shout out to Chuck Recor. Without Chuck's vision of building the strongest nonprofit community in the world, maybe the universe, I think right here in the Triangle, thank you, this type of ongoing education, this connection would just not happen at this level. So claps, high fives, thumbs up. Chuck, we love you. Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to be able to work with you on all these programs. So tonight,
very, very kind of you.
You deserve it, brother. So tonight, you can expect to receive nonprofit industry experience from Armstrong McGuire. We'll have some breakout sessions for critical discussion if you can stick around. We've got live case study examples, and obviously we will be doing all of the community sharing that we always do in the Harvard 100. And if you do stick around to the end, you're going to hear about an Easter egg style of a surprise about a really, really special, and also what I will say is an attainable grant for your organization. So I just want to say thank you again for joining us, for keeping this open source sharing mindset in our community, because it is what makes this place super special, not just for nonprofits, but the entire community. So thank you. Ashley, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you, Danny. Hello, everybody. It's great to see so many of you and so many friends who I have missing in person. Hello. I am Ashley Campbell. I am a lawyer at Campbell Law School, but I also attended Harvard when I was board chair at Step Up Ministry. And I am very excited to talk to you tonight about succession planning and about what the committee that I have been a part of has been working on over the last several months to bring to you tonight. So again, I'm Ashley, and I'm joined here by Chris Peterson and Bobby Simpson, who we all actually, and if you guys could raise your hands, we went to Harvard together years ago, and we started working as a subcommittee on issues related to succession planning and how we could encourage the Harvard 100 to participate in succession planning, which we know is something that's really important to nonprofit organizations. And so we're bringing to you tonight what we think is going to be a really great and special program. And it's going to kick off with a presentation from our friends at Armstrong McGuire, who many of you know. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce them, and then I'm going to turn the floor over to Bert Armstrong. So Armstrong McGuire provides counsel to their clients in all areas of nonprofit development and management. Many of us have worked with them on succession planning, leadership, organization, and resource development. Tonight, we've got a dream team from Armstrong McGuire. Stacy Barfield is on the call, and then also Bert Armstrong, who is the co-founder and principal at Armstrong McGuire, and Shannon Williams, who is the principal advisor and director of client management. They are going to do about a 25-minute presentation on how to build a successful succession plan, and then we'll continue with the program as Danny mentioned. So turning it over to you now, Bert.
Yeah. Thank you, Ashley. It's great to see you. It's great to see all of you. Chuck, thank you very much for being the driver and the force to keep the Harvard 100, bringing so much talent into our community and helping to equip them the way you have. We appreciate that. Folks, I'm going to spend the first little bit, as Ashley said, trying to walk you through some thoughts and some ways of thinking about succession planning, just to sort of get you framed and centered, right? There's some other conversations that will follow and some breakout sessions and some other things, but let me share my screen if I can remember how to do this effectively. And that's not the screen I wanted to see. There we go. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. So really what I want to talk about today is just the inevitable and unavoidable reality that we all go through transitions in our leadership, in our nonprofit organizations. And so I want to walk through what some of the important elements to that are. I want to give you some things to think about as you go back to your own organizations. The truth is, several of you I'm looking out here are current or past clients, friends and colleagues. We've had a lot of these discussions informally. Some of you have heard us talk about succession planning before. So hopefully for a lot of you, this won't be brand new information and will just reaffirm some things that we've discussed or maybe that you've seen in some other places. Real quickly, just about us, for those that aren't familiar with the firm, and Ashley, thank you for the introduction. We've been around since 2004. I have a terrific team of 8 people who are really gifted in all those different areas of nonprofit capacity building work. And we operate on 4 principal values that we just don't deviate from. And one is integrity in everything that we do, in every relationship that we have, bringing our experiences and others into every client engagement, building trusting relationships and making sure that we can produce the kind of results that are impactful for you. We work across North Carolina. As Ashley said, our focuses are in leadership development, organizational development, and resource development. And there's things underneath all of those that some of you may be familiar with. And we do a lot of work in executive recruiting. And it's in that vein that led us almost 17 years ago into a model for executive transitions and succession planning called executive transition management. We were really fortunate to be on the ground floor of some work that was being done across the country by thought leaders, by nonprofit leaders, folks in leadership development roles who were looking at the nonprofit industry. And they were really thinking about the transitions of founders. And there was a lot of research being done that was showing this significant change in leadership that was coming. And it was frightening for a lot of people because you saw all these nonprofit executive directors and founders of organizations that were talking about leaving in a fairly short period of time. And so they put together this model that is not so much about recruitment, although there's a recruitment element, but it really is focused on preparing organizations for the inevitable transitions in leadership. And just give a shout out to a few of the folks that we have worked with through the years, a group called Transition Guides, which is now called RAFA, which is, I just learned this week, is a division now of Markham's nonprofit and social sector group. But the founders and developers of this model, Tom Adams was one of the people that started Transition Guides, and we were able to be fortunate to be trained in this model through him and some of his team members. Compass Point is a group out of California that was partners with Transition Guides. The Annie Casey Foundation has funded a lot of this work around leadership transitions through the years. Our own North Carolina Center for Nonprofits, we are thrilled with the fact that they have embraced the importance of succession planning and leadership transitions. And I will just point you to their website for some terrific white papers, research, information, tools that you can use related to succession planning and transitions. And I think you'll find a lot of this stuff to be very valuable. BoardSource, just a quintessential terrific resource for all of us, and the National Council of Nonprofits. As we jump into this, and I'm not going to ask you to do this, you can put some stuff in the chat box if you'd like to, but I just want you to be thinking a little bit about your own experiences in the organizations that you work in or the boards that you serve, and think about the situations that have led to departures of a chief executive through the years. Were they healthy situations? Were they unhealthy situations? What were the positive and negative impacts of that transition on the organization and on the staff and on your donor community? And then as you think about whether you've been involved in one and seen a transition before, or whether you've been through one yourself, when you look ahead, is your current organization prepared for a transition in leadership? And that being, be it planned or unplanned, because both happen. Sometimes we get caught off guard even with the planned transitions. But how much work have you done and thinking have you done around that? And then, what is your biggest fear or your biggest frustration when it comes to leadership transitions, right? What are the things that worry you the most? If you're a board member, what keeps you up at night? If you are a staff member and you have seen this happen, what didn't go well? How did you feel? Did you feel left out? Did you feel included in a process like that, right? So just sort of frame all this conversation, all this presentation into your own experiences, and we'll go from there. Won't go through all these details, but there's been a lot of research through the years related to succession planning and leadership transitions. You're going to see some dated information here. The latest information on this slide is 2016. There's a lot of stuff that I expect will come out in the next year to 2 years. But even just looking at some of this older data that we've sort of been following and tracking through the years, what you see is a tremendous amount of consistency in the issues and the challenges facing organizations, right? Longtime leaders are preparing to leave, right? We have the average age of our executive directors back in 2013 was 60 years or older. So you're going to see a lot of change from that. A lot of folks that have gone through leadership transitions reported out that they were either unplanned, or they were challenging, or they were disruptive, or they were difficult. And most reported that they had done no assessment of leadership talent and really not worked to identify within their own organization folks that could step up in a crisis, or folks that could step up in an opportune moment when leadership was going to be changing. So this is just, a lot of folks don't have emergency backup plans. What happens, I can't say this anymore. I used to say the proverbial, the director gets hit by a bus, but executive directors don't like that very much. So we talked about what happens when Lori O'Keefe decides that she is going to go run off to Hawaii and not come back. We have to be thinking about what's happening in our organization when those things can come upon us. So let's talk about some of the unavoidable truths, right? Whether we like it or not, whether you like it or not, whether you have the best leader in the world, the person that you just love and adore and respect and admire and has done so much for your organization, or whether you work in a place where the leader is challenged, ill-equipped, unprepared, difficult to work with, it doesn't matter. Whether you like it or not, they're there, and they have a tremendous impact on every aspect of your organization, both present and future, right? They have significant impact on the operating environment in general, right? The culture of the organization, on the services that you provide and the quality of those services. They set the tone for everything from vision to strategic planning. They hire and they fire and dismiss people and everything in between. They're responsible for your promotions. They're responsible for developing the organizational structure and who reports to whom. They build budgets and they drive the sort of where the finances are going within your organization. You need them to be capable to make tough decisions. They are looked at by your donors and your communities as a person that they want to have confidence in, they want to believe in, they want to have see their passion. They want to be inspired by this person. And they make decisions that can build up your organization or can tear it down. And some of those things can happen over a long period of time and be very painful and hurtful for a long time. Sometimes it can happen overnight. They can make decisions and do things that can be very, very detrimental to the organization. So truths to that. And the other truth is leaders leave, right? Gone are the days when founders of organizations came, stayed for 20 years, 25 years, 30 years, and folks just didn't have to worry about that, right? They had all this institutional knowledge. They had all this relationship. They were typically beloved because they were so caring and so committed to their mission. Today, that's not the case, right? The average tenure for an executive director, I don't have the exact research, but 5 years, 6 years, maybe 7 or 8. Alice Lutz, I think, is on this call, and she and I had lots of conversations back when she started work about how long she might be at Triangle Family Services. She might be that next 20-year person. And I can't see her on my screen, but I expect I'm not getting the look that I would like right about now. But the question I ask you is, why would any organization leave any of this to chance, right? It makes no sense. You have to plan, you have to prepare. So that's what we're talking about here when we think about succession planning. It's about reflecting on who you are as an organization, getting clarity about who you are, what you want to be, how you communicate. It's not a one and done thing. Lots of folks think it's a thing we can just check a bunch of boxes and fill in some blanks with some phone numbers and some addresses of contacts in that short-term emergency plan, and our work is done. It's not what it is. It is about setting priorities for the future of the organization, thinking about how the organization is going to move towards those priorities and who's going to lead them there. It is about emergency succession planning. It is about thinking about, what happens, when your leader runs off and doesn't come back, and it's unexpected. You do have to have that kind of preparation work, but it's sort of a balance there, right? It's thinking about your founder or that longtime leader and their departure and recognizing how tied they are to the organization and its mission and its people, and making sure that we're thinking about how are they being impacted as they begin to think about a transition, leaving or retiring. And it's about the ongoing professional development of our team, right? Our staff and our board. It's constantly feeding that beast, right? It's making sure that we are always looking for ways to build our staff, to educate, to professionally develop our staff, to identify those in our staff that have the ability to step forward into new and bigger roles, right? And giving them those opportunities. Same thing for our board. It's about making sure that we've got really effective board engagement, board recruitment, board cultivation, board responsibilities and accountability standards. It's all of those things that we have to sort of think about. And so when I say that succession planning is not short-term, it's something that really should be built into the DNA of the organization, right? And it's up to the board really to take that responsibility. So let's talk about, excuse me, I got a little bit of a timer here so I don't get myself in trouble, but let's talk about 5 reasons that successful nonprofits do commit to succession planning. One, they recognize how important that work is to the sustainability of the organization, to its direction, to staff development, to the long-term success. They know that leadership matters, and they know that tying a quality, effective, preparing for the transition of an effective leader and looking for the right next leader is something that they, as a board in particular, have to be attentive to all the time. They value their relationships with the people around them, right? Their donors, their community partners, their staff, their stakeholders, all of those folks. They understand that change can be costly, right? That there is an investment of time and money and energy that you have to pay attention to, and you have to prepare for, and you have to plan for and budget for. And they know that crisis and chaos are really bad outcomes when it comes to leadership transitions, right? There's nothing worse than a departing executive leaving on bad terms, things going bad, them not providing information that you need to keep going when they leave. Those things can be really problematic. And they all embrace that theory that good endings lead to good beginnings. so that as the departing executive prepares to move on, what are we doing to make sure that we're celebrating that? What are we doing to make sure that we are affirming that person and all that that person may have done to help your organization? Because your staff and your donors, they're all connected in a lot of ways to those longtime beloved leaders. And so good or smart organizations recognize that we have to pay attention to that as we go through this process. What are some things that can happen if you don't plan well? That may be the bigger question that everybody is thinking about. One, that loss of institutional knowledge. Those leaders who know everything, they know everybody, they know where the bodies are buried, they know where the keys are, they know who your major donors are and what makes them tick. They understand all of that, but they keep it right here, right? It's all in their own head. Maybe they haven't done an effective job of capturing that information, or sharing that information with other leaders in the organization. So there can be a real risk as you think about transitions, of losing relationships and information. Anxiety that comes with the people that are worried when a leader leaves, right? We all know this from grant funding and otherwise. A lot of our donors, particularly foundations, will put a halt or a temporary suspension on grant funding as you're going through a leadership transition. It's because they are worried sometimes and they want to know what kind of leader you're going to have next, or how equipped is the board and the staff for this kind of transition. So you have a lot of potential for anxiety and disruptions and loss of those key relationships that you need to pay attention to. You have the abandonment or the disruption of major capital campaigns. You know, what happens when your CEO, your chief executive, sort of ups and leaves, and you're 30% of the way towards a major capital campaign, and somebody made the decision to go ahead and build the building because we sure we're going to raise the money, and all of a sudden things change dramatically, and it puts a lot of financial risk on the organization. I'll give you one quick example. I won't bore you with it, and I won't tell you if this is a past client or not, but I will just share with you that one example of an organization, longtime leader, made the decision to leave. The board really did not put any kind of process in place. They were encouraged to hire a friend of the outgoing director, and the board accepted that sort of on face value and decided to make that hire. But as that person came on board, there was no clarity given about the expectations of a new leader, expectations needed by the board. And so pretty quickly they came into conflict. And in that conflict, that person was dismissed within 6 months of coming on board. Now think about that. Think about the losses. Think about the disruptions. Think about the costs. It's expensive. It could be a very expensive thing when a transition goes bad, right? And it doesn't work well. You've got costs related to a severance, a significant severance perhaps for the person, so you can move them along without worrying about legal implications and things like that. You've got lost relationships and opportunities. There's no telling what happened internally with staff or with your stakeholders and community partners during that time. You've got lost in dollars due to disruptions if you're in the middle of that campaign and all of a sudden everything gets halted. You're going to lose staff morale, and the board is going to lose the confidence of the staff and of the people around them. And those are really dangerous things, and something to be really attentive and careful about. You also, when you don't plan well, you run into a lot of issues with staff anxiety or entitlement, right? Anxiety because staff are nervous. Entitlement because, depending on how effective the board has been in their role, sometimes we have staffs that believe they're in charge, and that when the leader leaves, they're going to take on everything. And they're the ones who are going to be making all the big decisions. And that usually happens, one of those things happens when the board falls out of balance in terms of what its responsibilities are. It refuses to address issues. It refuses to communicate effectively with the staff when things are happening. Sometimes boards can get too deep in the weeds, right? Without clarity about their responsibilities, they can wind up doing too much and taking on too much responsibility, and staff are confused and they don't understand how to deal with that. There's oftentimes a rush to hire quickly or to promote internally without understanding the current needs. So we go out there and we try to hire a staff person and just get the job done. The board doesn't want to have to deal with it for too long. Another thing that you worry about is interim leadership is sometimes they can forget their place. They can misinterpret what their roles are supposed to be if they're not articulated well by the board. Interim leadership is about stability and preparation for what's to come, building a good platform. It's not about auditioning for the permanent job. And there needs to be serious conversations with boards leading into a transition about whether or not a potential interim person might be a candidate for that kind of a job, whether an internal candidate at all should be a candidate for the job. It's not a right or wrong answer to those things, but they're conversations that should be had well in advance of ever having to deal with the issues directly. And oftentimes that doesn't happen. Some steps you could take now to really be prepared. One, educate and position your board and your staff. Talk about these issues well before you think you need to, because there will come a time when this transition hits you in the face and you're not exactly sure what to do with it. Hold what I like to call brain dump sessions with your current leader, right? They know a lot of things. They've got a lot of institutional history and knowledge. Capture that information as best you can. Make sure they're capturing it in your database. Make sure they're introducing others in the organization to your key stakeholders, to your key partners and your key donors, right? Start now, before you have to really think about a transition, and put a board committee in place for succession planning. Make it an ad hoc committee if you want to, or make it a standing committee. It's a conversation that should always be in place, because it's not just about your executive director. It's also about that staff development work that we talk about and preparing others for leadership roles. It's also about succession planning for the board and making sure that that we've got a good plan in place for how we recruit and move along board members. And go ahead and now put that basic emergency succession plan in place. Absolutely. No point in waiting. As I mentioned, the Center for Nonprofits has got some great resources. I encourage you to check their website out. They've got great templates. And in some of those cases, that's really all you need is a template for those things. Conduct regular evaluations with your staff. Help them understand how much you appreciate them, how much you value them. For those that you have identified who have particular gifts in leadership, develop them, send them to conferences, send them to workshops, make sure that they get that you're doing cross training with your staff so that folks understand different roles within the organization, and build out your strategic plan. If you don't have a strategic plan, please get one, create one, spend the time to invest in the conversations about where the organization is wanting to go. That will greatly impact the kind of leadership that you're going to need going forward. Therefore, it impacts really the succession planning that you're talking about. Make sure in your planning you include goals for that internal capacity, right? Strategic planning can't be all about all the external stuff and all the services we're going to provide and the people we're going to serve. It's also got to be about caretaking of our organization. Keys to effective succession planning is recognizing the change is inevitable. It's okay. It is absolutely necessary because, as I said earlier, nonprofit leaders aren't staying for 20 and 25 and 30 years anymore, right? They are leaving, except for Alice Lutz. Different times in an organization's history also requires different types of leadership. So no matter how great your leader is, as that next season comes, are you in a growth mode as an organization? And do you need new and different skills? Is this just maintaining and keeping things going because they're working really well? Or do you have some changes and some things you have to do to fix and repair an organization? You have to be talking about those things now so that when the time comes, you can develop the kind of leadership profile that you're looking for. And recognize it takes an investment of time, right? We've heard every excuse in the book as to why people don't do succession planning. We don't have the budget for it. We're too busy. We got too many things going on. We're just trying to meet payroll. Or the great one I love is we have time. Our executive director is not going anywhere for 5 years. And we did a succession plan several years ago where the executive director looked me in the eye and said, I'm probably going to retire in 5 years. We went through a 6-month succession planning process. 12 months later, 13 months later, I got a call from the executive director that she was going to retire. And the board was so grateful for the work it had done and spending the time to think about, okay, what do we do when this comes? Because they expect her to be there for a long time too, but just not a reality. It wasn't going to happen. And there's some extraordinary outcomes, right? Good endings lead to good beginnings. I talked about that. If you do good succession planning, you're going to build a much healthier platform for whoever comes in to be your next leader in an organization. You're going to have a much more engaged team, staff and board. They're going to feel much more part of what you're doing because they've been invited in to some of these important conversations. Staff are going to feel valued because you're developing them professionally. The board is going to feel like it has a real significant, tangible role that it can do something, and sometimes more than just about raising money, which lots of boards worry because that's all they think their organizations want them to do. And you're going to attract a really qualified and a diverse candidate pool, right? Successful organizations that demonstrate they've got it together are going to be attracted to the right kind of candidates that you need, right? The right profile of those candidates. So I am trying to stick into my time here, and I think I'm right at it, but preparing for organizations for a healthy change in leadership, it's going to be planned or unplanned. Just be ready for that, right? Be prepared for those things. Strengthen your people, your processes, and your services. Pay attention to the relationships and the organizational ethos, right? The culture, how your organization operates. Be really attentive to that, because when you're thinking about bringing in new leadership, you want people that are going to fit there, right? Be a good fit with others and be able to make change in the organization if that's what it needs. And remember that your leadership goes hand in hand with sustainability, strategy, and success. Remember 3 words, right? The 3 words that we learned at the very beginning when we were trained in this executive transition management is prepare, pivot, and thrive, right? And the preparation is everything we're talking about with succession planning. Do it now, do it early, have the important conversations, do the brain dump with your leaders, right? Think about your staff and how you can help them grow and develop. Do all those things right now, right? Make sure that your board really understands that when a time comes for a transition, they're going to be called upon for some extra heavy lifting sometimes. And develop that leadership opportunity and profile. What is it? How's it going to work? Pivot. When the time comes, be ready. If you need interim leadership, have that in place. If you've got the capacity to conduct a search yourself, launch that committee that you have already kind of prepared and put it, and set up and appointed, or hire your outside counsel if you need that. And we can talk some about that. Engage stakeholders in this. You need to listen, right? As you're going through this process, and you can do a lot of this stuff on the front end that we talked about during the preparation stage. Listen to your donors, listen to your partners, listen to your customer and your client. They have a lot to say that is really important as you think about leadership transitions. Be thoughtful in your interview process. Don't rush to judgment. I always liken a first interview with a candidate to a first date. You're not going to know everything or learn everything about them, but hopefully you're going to know enough about those candidates that you'd like to bring back for a second conversation. And then you can start beginning to think about engagement and marriage. But first you got to really understand who they are, and give yourself time and give them time to kick the tires too, right? This is a two-way street. And look for what you need, not for what you have or what you had. As great as your previous leader may have been, as beloved as they may have been, as successful as they may have made your organization, that doesn't mean that their profile and their skills and the way they run the organization is what you need next. So be willing and open to looking at other skills and other attributes in your leadership. The last thing is to thrive, right? Make sure you save energy after you go through a succession plan, after you go through a major transition and you hire a new leader. In a lot of ways, the work has just begun, because you need to be able to onboard a new leader effectively and in a healthy way. And we talk about this, whether you do it in a formal way or not, you need to have something that we call a covenant conversation, right? Sit in a room with the leader and the board, the new executive and the board, and have a conversation about expectations, shared leadership responsibilities, right? Do that before, everything hits the fan and life gets busy, chaotic, and hard decisions are having to get made, so that you're setting your new leader up for a healthy launch into wherever you're heading as an organization together. So I'm going to stop there, and I think I may have blown past by a minute or two, so I do apologize, but we'll stop there. And I think, Dana, you were going to maybe check to see if there were any questions. I'm happy to answer. My team's happy to answer.
Bert, we have some questions. First, I want to say we're not talking about the leaders and who happen to be on this call today, but there's one other point of view. Bert was talking about nonprofit leaders who are all good, and you're sorry you're losing them. But there's always that opposite problem of having a leader that you should get rid of, and a board is shy to do it because you don't have a succession plan. And I have some more stories of an organization where a leader was caught in some serious lies. And because the board didn't have a succession plan, they said, we really don't want to have to get rid of them because we don't want to have to search for someone, and we don't have anyone who can do the job in the interim. And so in the process, they lost half the board when they should have lost the leader. So having a succession plan is like having personal walking away money that you should have so you can walk away from a terrible job. A good succession plan enables a board to be able to walk away from a bad leader.
Yeah. Thank you, Dana.
Okay, there was a question about the brain dump session. So Bert, can you talk more about what kind of topics you talk about in a brain dump and the techniques to do that effectively?
Yep. So oftentimes when we recommend setting up a transition committee, succession planning committee, we may assign one member of the board to be kind of the outgoing leader's liaison, right? Someone who can shadow that person for a season, right? If you're doing this well in advance of a transition, you may have several months. Don't formalize it too much, but be intentional about getting together with your leader on a regular basis, maybe once a week, or maybe it's every couple of weeks for coffee. Again, depending on how long your window is, and have a topic of conversation, right? One day you may want to talk about donors to the organization. Tell me about our special donors. What makes them tick? Why did they choose to come on board and support us? Why has this foundation been giving to us for the last 15 years, right? Why did this particular family choose to invest in and make the lead gift to our building, right? Because if nobody else except for the executive director has that knowledge, those relationships will get lost, right? They may stay around, but they're not going to be as strong. So making sure we understand that. Another conversation may be around your community partners, right? Have you been a very collaborative organization? And if so, who are those organizations that you've been able to really depend on? And what is it about them? Is it because of the relationship the ED has with another ED, or is it because of something else? But just be intentional about the topics that you want to cover, what you want to hear, and capture the information. That's the biggest piece, right? Because you got to get it out of here. You've got to get it somewhere where other people know how to access it, right? If it's about the history of the organization, right? You'd be surprised at how many organizations never really capture their history. And so it's left to be made up by people who weren't a part of it. So that's what I'm talking about. Don't over formalize it, but it's it's comfort food for your outgoing leader to know that someone values all that they have done and the relationships they've built and all that, and someone wants to capture that and keep it for posterity and for use later on.
Okay, great. Bert, there's another question from someone who is relatively new to an organization with a large team and wants to work on succession planning. He wants to know how you keep your team calm if they've never been through that process.
Yeah. Communicate with them and engage with them, right? Too often what we see when boards take on this role of, okay, the executive's leaving, it's our job to go out and find the new leader. And they take all that on and they think we know best. And yet you've got this staff that is working day to day, hand in hand, right? They're still delivering services, all those things. And oftentimes they don't hear from the board. They're not communicated with. Their opinions aren't asked for in the process. We strongly encourage on the front end of be it developing a succession plan in the midst of an early stages of a transition, that you engage the staff in conversation. And some of that may be someone from the board just sitting and having a conversation around the table, right? Depending on how big the staff is. Some of it is getting information out from the board chair about what's happening and what the process is going to look like, and where will their input be sought, right? And reminders also, though, when I talked earlier about staff entitlement, making sure that staff do understand it is the board's job to make this decision, right? That's their role as a governing body. But the board values their input. But at the end of the day, input stops here and a decision has to get made. And you want staff to be able to respect that. They'll do that better if you communicate with them, if they feel like you're being transparent and open and sort of keeping them in the loop as this process goes forward, and give them a chance to meet some of the top candidates at the end. Again, not to pick them, not to rank them. You know, you might not do it all in a big group. You might just have some of your key staff do it and speak back to the rest of the staff, but don't be afraid to engage your staff in the process. Just make sure they understand what the role and responsibility is.
Okay, one other question is about the ED's not leaving, but some of their senior staff is leaving. And is succession for them the same? And how do you provide paths for internal promotion versus hiring from the outside?
Yeah, we touched on it just a touch, and probably we could have done a deeper dive on that. But it does go back to that idea of in good succession planning, you are looking across the organization, top to bottom, left to right, and you're saying, where are the people in our organization that have real talent and have real leadership skills? And during this planning process is a great time to identify them, to identify where you see them potentially fitting within the organization going forward, and then encouraging them in terms of their own professional development. That should be an ongoing part of just general staff development. And then the right leaders having conversations with those folks at the right time about how they see them, you know, in a transition, what they may see them coming in to do, either in an interim, for an interim period, or to come in and maybe be a candidate for whatever that job may be. But if you're not preparing those folks, your mid-level managers and others, you're gonna have a void there, and you're gonna have to go outside to find all your leadership. You know, how great is it when you've got the right person sitting in the seat and it makes sense. Let's go ahead and we can keep moving. We can move forward quicker, and we don't lose a lot there because there's that thread that is continuing.
We have more questions. This is obviously a topic that people are interested in, but we're going to move on to the next section. And if people have questions, you know, send them. We'll try and find ways to answer them for you.
Thank you. And thanks, everybody.
So Bobby and John are up next. Good job.
Okay. Well, good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, well, good evening. My name is Bobby Simpson, and I'm a retired professional from an electric utility after a long career. And I'm currently on the board of directors for Transitions Life Care. And John Toma and I are going to spend a few minutes just sharing with you our succession planning experience. And so I'll cover, you know, how we got traction getting the succession planning process at Transitions Life Care going. And I'll show you the process. And John is going to talk more about the application of it, the benefits, and the lessons learned. And I will tell you that this slide deck that we're getting ready to go through, it was not prepared specifically for Harvard 100 or this session tonight. It's a good year old. And I think that helps make a point of we've got the process captured, and we're able to not only use it, but share it. And to get things going, I want to start with a story. So this is a personal story. So back in the 80s, I was promoted into a job that was a pretty typical traditional job for an electric utility, and it was a leadership role, and it was a pretty significant day job. But what I learned is also included in that day job was what I used to refer to as an add-on that you had to spend a lot more time on than you anticipated, and it had to do with emergency response. So emergency response is important to an electric utility. This was the 80s. And when I stepped into that role, what I found is the person that used to do that had been gone from the company for several years, and I couldn't find anyone that had a really good feel for what you needed to do to be proactive and prepared for that. And the way I figured it out is there was a hurricane in 1989 named Hugo that some of you may remember that slammed the two Carolinas. And that's how I figured out what the role was. But as soon as that was over, I got busy and started working on developing bench strength, roles and responsibilities, succession planning, et cetera. And we got on top of that, and things went very well going forward. But the point is, I've carried that emotional anxiety the rest of my career. And so when I went on the board of Transitions Life Care the first time in 2008, I asked a lot of questions about succession planning off and on. We would talk about it, talk about the importance of doing it, but we never really got any traction. It took quite a number of years. And when I became board president, I started talking about it some more. And one night at a board meeting, I was getting on my soapbox about it, and I noticed a relatively new board member was looking at me kind of funny. And I said, Don, do you have a question? And he said, Bobby, I understand it. I get it. I got it. We'll make it happen. Turns out he was the VP of HR at Martin Marietta. And when I made that connection, I said, good, I knew it was going to happen. Well, I rolled off the board right after that. And I just came back on the board this year. So there was a 5-year gap that I was gone. And when I came back, what do you think my first question was? I said, John, do y'all have a succession plan? He said, sure do. And he sent me all the info, and we had a great discussion about it. And not only is there a plan, it is very active and in use. And John will talk more about that in a minute. So before I start going through these slides, I want to call your attention to one of my takeaways from the Harvard Governing for Nonprofit Excellence. You may remember this alignment model that they talked about. They talked about a lot of stuff, but the alignment model is something that stuck with me. It was a Venn diagram, and one of the circles was mission and vision. Another circle was capacity in terms of resources and structure. And the third circle was support, meaning do you have good support and the other support you need? Do you have what you need? Do you have the framework and the structure and the resources to do the mission and vision that you say you want to do? They really stressed that. And they talked about how you really have got to get your leadership in place to where the leaders have the skills that you're looking for to fulfill that mission and vision and to support the values of the organization and hold people accountable to perform and deliver on that mission and vision. And so that's something that stuck with me, and it was very useful when we started talking about succession planning. So what you're going to see here is what I call a strategic, living, ongoing, and iterative plan that's business as usual. You heard Bert say this is not one and done. It's not one and done. It is business as usual at Transitions Life Care. So, Stacy, if you'll go to the next slide, or actually go to the slide 3, very next one. Yeah, so, one of the first things we had to do was figure out, so what are the goals of this thing? Why are we doing it? What do we hope to accomplish? What are the outcomes we want to achieve? And how are we going to do it? What's the approach? And the approach that we took is to identify what are the critical skills and talents that we need for the ongoing success of the organization, and are they aligned with the vision and mission? And we really had to scrub the vision and mission to do that. And then we had to look at the existing skills and talents that were in place in the leadership positions at that time, and what gaps do we have that we need to close. And as you heard Bert say, it's up and down, left and right. It wasn't any particular level. It was a succession plan. It's a succession plan that addresses the entire organization, and it looks at high potentials. Where are the people in your organization that have the potential, but they need some help from a developmental standpoint so they'll be ready? Next slide. So what you'll see are some, what I call tools. You'll see a competencies chart, a succession depth chart. Some people call that bench strength chart, a developmental plans template. And this came up a minute ago with one of the questions, I believe. There are some challenges with this. And I refer to it as change management. So when you start doing this, it's really important to communicate with the organization to make sure that everyone understands. So when you say this word succession plan, what does that really mean? And what does it mean we go do? Because there are different perceptions and definitions that people have in their own mind about what succession planning is. And frankly, it can be uncomfortable if people don't really understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. Next slide. And so this just is a sample organizational chart that to make the point that it's up and down, left and right. But going through the process of looking at your organization in this way helps you identify what are the key positions we want to focus on, what is the priority in terms of how we want to do succession planning with respect to the positions. It's also an opportunity to revisit job scopes, clarify job scopes, which roles are critical path in terms of the success of the mission and vision. The next slide is where you have to write down what are your key competencies, what things really matter with respect to your vision and mission. Next slide. And this is where you eventually you get to the point, and this is where, this is why the getting people comfortable with what it is you're doing and why is so important, because you get to the point where you have to take those leadership competencies I just showed you and look at the background and experience of the people in the jobs and rate them, and score them in terms of, are they at a competent level in terms of these competencies, or do they need development? And it's all in the spirit of finding out your strengths, finding your gaps, and helping people develop to be able to aspire to roles that they may be very capable of performing if they have some planning and leadership support and development. Next slide. This is a retention slide where you assess the retention situation. So this is where you look specifically at what is the likelihood that an individual would leave this organization voluntarily over the next year? And you can rate that, and then you can rate what is the impact of the organization if that person does leave. And that helps you get a feel for the criticality of different roles, where your gaps are, what kind of developmental work you may want to do with an individual. It essentially is a way to make things actionable so that you have a path forward. And then the next one is a depth chart. So this is where you can look at your incumbents, the people in the positions, and you can identify, or when you look at a list of employees, who's ready now. So you may have someone that's ready right now for the VP of Human Resources, for example, or you may have someone that has the potential to be really effective as a VP of Finance, but they need time to prepare for that, so they could be ready short term or ready long term. So the 1 to 2 years is ready short term, and anything beyond 2 years I would consider ready long term. So you can see how this process is all linked together, and it helps take you through a path to where you can really set yourself up for success moving forward. The next one is a template of developmental plans. So after you rate the leaders, we just looked at that slide. After you rate the leaders in terms of their competencies, you can put together very tailored, specific developmental plans based on what their gaps are and what they want to accomplish, what they want to get better at. And sometimes it's a matter of leveraging their strengths But the point is to have a developmental plan that everyone can understand and own and be a part of developing. The next slide. This is where you can look at people that are within the organization that are rising stars. Some people call these high potentials. So there's people that, this helps you not take people for granted because they're just so good at what they do right now. They may have the ability to do something much bigger and better if they're just given an opportunity and given some encouragement and support. And if leadership helps them start thinking about other things they can do in the future instead of assuming they're going to always be doing that. And I believe, and this last slide is just where you can document what do you know and what do you think in terms of when people might leave. And of course, the key thing here is going through the process, engaging the leaders in the organization and getting this written down so that you have a reference point. So that's basically what this has done for Transitions Life Care is it's created a path forward that you can see, you can watch it, you can manage it, you can predict it, you can plan, you can adjust, and you can be ready and no emergencies.
Thank you,
So,
Bobby.
John, if you can take it from there and talk a little bit more about how it's been applied and the benefits.
Sure, thank you, Bobby. Great presentation, overview. I appreciate you doing that. Yeah, we were so thrilled to have the expertise of Don McCunniff at Martin Marietta, and how we apply it is really an ongoing cycle of succession planning and just making sure that we create the space and the opportunity and the expectation that these are ongoing discussions between me and my executive senior leadership team, but also the expectation that these discussions are happening within the next level of directors and managers and supervisors to make succession planning a part of leadership competencies and leadership expectations throughout the organization, and to continually identify rising stars. I think it's really all about, as Bert said, it's about sustainability. It is very strategic, and it develops and rewards staff and talent, and it ensures a long-term success. So we continually revisit our plan, ongoing meetings with the executive team, whether one-on-one or in a group. We revisit succession planning as part of our annual performance reviews that I do with my team. We have to review it as part of our strategic planning process. There's always something related to succession planning in our strategic plans every year. And of course, we have to review it when we're looking at budgeting and retaining talent and making sure that we're rewarding staff appropriately to keep that talent. Some of the benefits have already been clearly articulated to the organization. I'd just like to highlight a couple. One of them is that in this process, you saw the slide about the key competencies. It's so important to clearly identify and articulate our corporate values, what we expect of all our leaders and all of our employees, but also the key competencies required of leaders and those common expectations. And it's some of those softer skills that are most important. Things like communication, being compassionate, eliciting the best in others, teamwork. Teamwork is one of our core values and so important to the success of the work that we do. And I remember Don McCunniff saying at Martin Marietta, there was zero tolerance for jerks. So kind of weeding out that jerk factor in looking at leaders and bringing on new leaders. Some of the lessons learned, I think it is very important. We talked about, Bert talked about it, Bobby talked about it, the importance of having these discussions out in the open, the transparency of this succession planning process, that it is about continued long-term success and succession, not successors. and to kind of take the mystery out of succession planning, have open meetings about it, talk with the managers and supervisors as they are charged to do succession planning, and address some of the misperceptions and fears around it, and really talk up the process without naming names or singling people out. I think for the ongoing succession planning that we're doing and how we continue to fine tune it, certainly we want to add diversity, equity, and inclusion to that list of competencies. And that's something that we're working on. We want to also focus on the succession planning process and identifying leaders, particularly the rising stars, with a diversity lens. See, are we fairly identifying rising stars? And is it a diverse group? Is it inclusive? And as Bert mentioned, this is something that's critical for boards to do. That's something that we need to work on as well. Our board president very much in this current strategic cycle has emphasized the need for succession planning among our board, the board leadership roles and board seats. So that's something that we'll be working on in the current year. And just the overall benefit for me, from my perspective, is, you know, I want Transitions Life Care to be around to serve me and my family when I need care at end of life. And I want the right people to be in a position to keep this organization thriving in order to do that. I'm very excited about the young talent that exists within Transitions Life Care. And they will carry on the mission and continue to improve our services. They bring new ideas, bring new technology skills. So that's really the benefit I see, is that it's a clear, if it's done right within the organization, we can have qualified promotions that are proven success. They're known leaders. And I've seen disasters happen in other hospice organizations that were ill-prepared, that had to all of a sudden do a search, bring in a leader who did not really know the organization. The board did not know that person. And it was just a disaster. And that's definitely something we want to avoid, that if we don't have the clear succession within the organization, that we at the very least have a clear plan on what we're looking for and how we're going to bring on the right person. So cannot underscore enough the importance of the work, and that it's part of the ongoing strategy and execution of the organization.
Thank you, John, and thank you, Bobby. That was amazing. And I am Christine Peterson. I had the opportunity to go to Harvard with Bobby and Ashley on behalf of Triangle Family Services. And I'm the lucky person who got to work with Alice and learned so much from her passion and the work that Triangle Family Services does. And so, you know, this is what's so beautiful about this program, this Harvard 100, is that, you know, when we started looking at how do we help nonprofits move forward this idea of succession plan, and I am living that in a for-profit right now, because I am that 30-year leader who is leaving the organization this year, and I know how painful it is, and I cannot stress enough the importance of succession planning. And you've heard it from the experts, Armstrong McGuire, and you've heard it from one of ours in Transitions Life Care with John and Bobby. And so now we would like to do a breakout session, because part of the power of this organization is that we have the expertise. We have people that have gone through this and are willing to share, but we also have each other in the networking. And so Stacy is going to break us into breakout sessions so that we we can be in a little bit smaller groups. And we would ask that everybody in the breakout introduce who you are and who you represent. And then we have several questions that the leader of the breakout session will add to the discussion. So Stacy, can you take us away?
For coming and staying. Thanks to the people who put this together, and I'm going to name names: Danny and Ashley, Bert, Stacy, Phil, Dana, Chris, and Bobby. All of you did just great jobs. It's wonderful. I think we taped this, and we're going to have some. I think you can get all the slides if you want them. I want to.
Hey, Chuck, just before we go into the closing comments, I think some people might be.
Yeah, that's right. I think you need to say something.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
So just before we go there, I think we want to talk a little bit about the opportunity to earn a grant.
Right ahead.
Excellent. So we have a couple of different things. First of all, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Phil Kowalczyk. I'm one of the officers of the Harvard 100 and was fortunate enough to attend Harvard 100 as a board member of the Green Share Project. And again, just a quick reminder that the role of this club is really to promote investment in leadership skills of the leadership in our nonprofit organizations in the Triangle. We try to do that through education, communication, action, and also community building. And tonight is a perfect example of that. The fact that we're all gathered here, that people worked hard in order to be able to take a meaningful subject and give you meaningful information, and to share that is exactly what we as a club try to do. Tonight, as a part of our education and call to action, I'm excited to announce the Michael R. Cunningham Grant Program to advance professional succession planning. This was put together in honor of Chuck Recor. It is funded by Michael Cunningham. It is very much around the purpose of helping organizations move forward. Before I go into the grant application, I really do want to take a minute to celebrate that this is really a wonderful example of how this community can step forward, and the Harvard 100 alumni and friends can be influential in creating change. Michael is very passionate about the subject of succession. He has built his own internal knowledge of it. He is a strong advocate on the topic, but he really wanted to provide the opportunity for a lot of organizations to be able to take this on. And if you have an existing plan, but you want to improve it, or if you don't have a plan at all, to provide the some economic support and incentive to move forward. That shows what an individual can do. And so I really do want to particularly thank Michael for his commitment, but also to Chuck for having called out the example of what one person can do. A few quick words of thanks before we get into the timeline and the application process. Obviously, a great call out to Chuck and also Denise Lowe, who have in fact shown us what can happen with the impact of one session at a time, 1 year at a time, and lo and behold, 10 years later and 130 people later, you can do some pretty significant things. To Michael for not only coming up with the idea, but literally acting upon it and stepping forward with money, which is also a great motivator. And third, to the Harvard 100 officers and the other people who presented here tonight, because they helped take what was only an idea and made it a reality. So how can you apply and how do you take advantage of this reality? If you go to the Harvard 100 website, which is www.theharvard100.org, you will find this information on the website. For those of you who learn by auditory as well as visual, I'll give you the quick highlights. The objective of this grant, and by the way, it is not a restricted grant, but its purpose is to create incentive and financial assistance to nonprofit organizations who are taking up the critical mantle of creating meaningful and potentially upgrading their succession planning process and documentation. So here are some of the rules. The grant funds are available to not only Harvard 100, but any 501c3 nonprofit in the Triangle area. So it's important, and feel free to share. There will be a total of 5,000 grants with funds to be issued in 2 phases, okay? So there are 5 organizations that can benefit. The grants are awarded in 2 phases. The first is $1,500 upon being selected for the grant, and then $3,500 upon completion and final submission of the written succession plan. The grants will be awarded based on the review of the submission, and we'll tell you where you can make that submission. It's actually right on the Harvard 100 website. And you'll be evaluated based on your submission and an essay explaining why and what you intend to do, as well as meeting the time deadlines and the thoroughness of your application. Grant submissions, and this is important, need to be signed by both your executive director or CEO and the chairman of the board. Back to the point that Bert made, alignment is everything. So we want to make sure that your organization is aligned on going down the succession path. Submissions of existing plans are to be submitted, as well as your final plans, but we ask that you redact any personal, confidential, or individual names from those plans. And the hope is that your plans will be able to be shared with others in the Triangle area, so that they can benefit and learn from the collective experience. Here's the time frame. Applications you can go on tonight, right? At 6:32, you can go on tonight and you can go for the application. They will be accepted through March 5th. Grant recipients will be notified by March 15th of 2021. Once you are selected, you will have between that time and up to September 1st of 2021 in order to be able to complete your succession plan. And the target date then for the balance of the distribution will be November 1st. All of these rules are available on the Harvard 100 site. And when you pull this up, you also see at the bottom here, there are a number of resources that are available that can also give you insights and guidance with regard to succession planning. So my sincere thanks to those who helped create this into an actual restricted grant or unrestricted grant opportunity, and we look forward to hearing from you. With that, I'd now like to turn it over to Chuck to give us some closing comments.
So let me add one thing before, at the conclusion of this meeting, there will be a PDF version of the grant questions, because I'm sure before you get online, you want to look at the questions and kind of formulate a game plan. So I'll add a PDF version of the grant questions to this page, so you can look at that in advance before submission.
That's a great idea.
So in summary, a couple things. The grant program is very interesting in the sense that there's someone who is willing to pay you to do the things you're supposed to be doing anyway. But that's a serious issue. Michael Cunningham is a very serious philanthropist, and there are philanthropists out there who want to find opportunities to leverage their money. Giving to an organization because they do good is very good, but if you can give the organization they do good and in addition elevate the leadership and the governance of the organization, that's good philanthropy. So this is a great opportunity. The program today was a lot. I mean, it was kind of like getting a sip of water out of a fire hose. You have to go back and get all those charts if you want to work through them. But I want to thank Danny and Ashley, Bert, Stacy, Phil, Dana, Chris, Bobby. Did a great job. Very difficult to get your arms around such a major topic. The fact of the matter is, it's not if you need a succession plan. You have to have a succession plan. It's not if your executive director leaves, it's when they leave. And generally when they leave, it's not prepared. It's an unprepared period. That's why you need a succession plan. 2 things that I would say to you. 1, I would put on my board meeting agenda a single line item that says succession plan. And the only question we have when we come to that agenda item is look around the boardroom and ask the board this question. Has anything changed since our last meeting that would negatively affect our succession plan? If the answer is no, asked and answered, you move on. If the answer is yes, then you may need to put a committee together to resolve that issue. Don't wait once a year to look it over. Second thing, if the succession plan is well written and you're really proud of it, send it to your major donors. Send it to your major donors for their review and a cover letter that says this is part of our effort to create sustainability worthy of your investment in us. Use their intellect as well as their money. This succession plan is a mandatory. I won't give an organization money anymore that doesn't have a succession plan. Because I don't want to give them the money and then the person that I gave it to, who I thought was going to do a great job, leaves. That's ineffective for me. Succession plan is core to success of your organization. So thank you all for attending and staying. The people that didn't stay, and they're not that many, don't tell them about the grant. Let them figure it out on their own. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chuck.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Just as a quick closing update, one, the Harvard has made known that the May program, which is for performance measurement for effective management of nonprofits, which is typically for the executive directors or CEOs, that program is happening. It's happening May 24th through May 28th. They have decided that it is going to be virtual. They have not made that declaration yet as it relates to the September program, which is typically for the board memberships. If you or somebody that you know is interested in nominating an organization to attend either the May or the September program, there are two ways that can happen. One, if you think the organization should be nominated to go forward and you have the funding for it, you can apply directly at Harvard, but we ask that you make the Triangle Alumni Club here aware so that we can include that organization as a part of our alumni on a regular basis. Secondly, if you have an organization that you would like to put forward, but you don't have the funding, then again, you can send that to our website at info@the-Harvard100 and register the organization that you're interested in, and we will do our best to try to match funding with an organization. So the program continues and our group continues to grow and the Triangle continues to grow in strength because we're working as a community. Many, many thanks to the efforts that Chuck originated and is seeking to have us all step forward and make it grow well.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Thanks, Chuck.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.